Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial on Cura using the material I've already put together. So let's take a look. So here I am. I've got Cura open. This is the most current version. You guys can get it installed. You've got to set up your printer when you install it. The thing would be we need to configure it to the printers we're working with, and I'd like to do that on Fridays during Friday's class, so we can get the specs of the printer set up. And we can match them up to the printers that we're working with. So let's save that for now, but let's start getting the actual print ready to go. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the model that I was working with. So I'm going to go File, I would go with New Project, and then I can go Open, and here we are. This is the truck hanger that we created, and I'm going to select it. This is coming from Maya. I go Open, and there it is. I'm just using the middle mouse wheel. This is the workspace. Middle mouse wheeling, and I'm just rolling backwards. And as I roll backwards, I zoom out. And then I can use the right mouse button, and I'm just clicking and dragging, and I'm orbiting. So I was underneath it before. Here we are. There's the truck. Unfortunately, this is probably poor placement for the truck as is, because it's going to have to do, again, create a build from the support material going down to here, because it could never withstand this overhang. So we would want to kind of reorient this. That would be something we think about. And then the next thing, as I mentioned before, is which side needs to be pretty. Which side is going to be facing our audience. And I know that this side is, but this is going to be a prototype. So this is not the final build. I'm going to do this at low resolution. And I think it's okay if this side has the support against it. I'll have to take a knife or a rasp, a little bit of a file, and clean this off, basically, sort of like with an X-Acto knife. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is reorient it. So we've opened this up. We're in the preview mode. I can click on Prepare. It works very much like the other programs that we worked with. And what I need to do is have this selected. You can see that I have all these little tools across the sidebar, but they're grayed out right now because I have nothing selected. When we get in here, though, we do see that the red is showing us the overhangs, that this is overhanging straight down to the ground, and this will need support. Could be supported, so we can choose whether or not to, but this stuff would definitely have to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. So I'm using this right mouse to move around, right mouse click to move around. I'm going to use a left click directly on it, and as you see, as I click it, you see that the rotation handles come up, and we can see if I go from the top, they have the move, which is T. They have a different hotkey system. This is S, and then this is R. DSR. So T to move, scale. We don't want to scale this because I want to keep real world scale. Absolutely, it has to match up to my camera. And then here, this is going to be the rotation. So what I'm going to do is I've selected rotation. I've got this here. And again, don't use the scale if you want to kind of stay in real world. And I'm dragging it, and you can see I'm totally failing. It's not working. And you can see as I'm moving, the red area, which is showing the overhang, is changing in real time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go Control Z. I use the Control Z to undo my move. And what I can do is I'm going to come over here, and we can see across the bottom we have these little view cubes. And the first one is going to be an orthographic view in the front view. The second one is going to be a top view. This should be a side view, and then the other side, so right and left. I'm going to go into the front view, and I'll go into a side view like this. Oh, there we go. Here's our side view. I'm going to grab the red handles. I want to grab the handle. I don't want to grab from the center of the rotation. And I'm going to drag it like this, and I want to try to get it in the position where it has the least amount of overhang, which I know to be this. The thing that I like about this program, it is auto configuring it. It's automatically bringing it to the build plate, so that it is not going through the build plate, although I think I got it to go through once. And it was showing a failure. So with this done, I could just mouse around, and this is something I would do in any 3D graphics. Always rotate and look at it in the round. Always take a look. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Middle mouse click to pan. So I'm clicking and holding. I'm going to rotate around a little bit. Zoom in here. Move around like this. This looks pretty good. So at this point, now what we're going to do is we're going to get the support set up, and we're going to configure the build. For basic people, if you haven't done this before, basically the easiest way to do it is go with the basic settings, which are pre-configured here. you need to have your printer set up correctly. So this would have material type, the heat, the speed, etc. So that would have to be configured correctly. But aside from that, the basic actual construction of the object, so how it's constructing the lines, the infill, etc. These are the default settings right now. So I can come over here, I open it up, I can open this by simply clicking across. This is just one bar, it doesn't seem to have individual clicks. I click on once into the bar, it opens this window, and we can see I've already configured one of the profiles here, but we can go over to this one, which is blank. So we could go to sort of what you would be seeing by default. So I'm going to switch to this here, and then this one should not have my updates. Okay, so this should look like yours. At this point, let's go through it. So I'm looking at this here, and basically the way that I would kind of do it at this point, before I start playing with these settings, let's slice it so we can actually see what we're looking at, and then we can start to modify. So what I can do is I can just basically, we're going to go with the default settings, which is right here. So over in recommended, um, by default, this is the thickness of the build, and this is going to really determine the resolution that I'm getting. So this is one of the most important ones. This is how fine and how beautiful it's basically going to look. It's how close together the resolution of the lines, which is making this up. So the 0.6 is going to be super high res. It is the highest res that this printer is going to do. This is supposed to be sort of standard. This is getting prototypey, and then this is real prototypey. I'm going to go with this because I want to save material and make a fast build. And as this number goes up and down, your build time is going to have a dramatic impact on build time. Next, visual. This does not have to be perfect. Engineering, this is going to be something, because I've got these settings set, you can actually go back and forth between these. I'm going to push it up to 2 because I know that's low res. Engineering is going to be, if these are mechanical parts, think if these are like something with teeth, you've got mechanical gears, any kind of parts which are going to work together, where the junction of those two objects is really important that they kind of work in sync. This is when we would turn engineering on, and then this is going to give a finer quality to the edge of that build, so you can get a better circular form here. So this should be, I don't need this, but again, we can turn this to draft. So this is basically fairly similar here. I'm going to leave it at 2 because this is pretty low, but like draft would also work. Infill, this is going to be the material inside of this. The outside will be like a shell, and then it's going to fill it with a lattice-like structure. We can change the configuration of that lattice structure to have different sort of structural qualities, and like that's definitely a consideration for possibly some of the projects. If this was functional, I was really trying to make it work, this would definitely have a major impact on it. So 100 is going to be a complete fill. This thing will be like a solid block. And then down to 0, this is going to be fairly minimal. You're going to see lots of negative space. There'll be lots of voids with basically a crisscrossed pattern going across here. And we can, again, change the density of it. We can change the thickness of the lines, making up that crisscross pattern. We can do a whole bunch of stuff to that. There are lots of options related to this. Next, let's go support. We're going to have a support. So I'm turning on the support. You probably need a support. I think we really need support, and definitely in certain areas. It's telling me the extruder. So this is again related to setting up the printer. If we have more than one extruder, you could choose them from here. Working with this, we have both extruders going. Adhesion right here. So this is going to basically tie it or sort of glue it to the plate. It needs to be anchored to print. Like when you see a print fail, it's not anchored to the plate, and it's just sort of making string. It becomes sort of this abstract artwork. The thing starts sliding all over the place in the build plate. So adhesion we would want on so that it is anchored some way to the plate, and then we have different options related to that. So from here, what I'm going to do is let's do a slice using these basic settings, and then we can go through the more detailed settings. So here I go. I'm going to click slice. Wait for it. This is actually pretty quick. Now I can hit preview. Hit the preview button, and there we go. I middle mouse click, or left mouse, right mouse click. and I move around, and we can see there is the build. And if you come underneath it, you can see here's the support. It looks incredibly overbuilt to me. So you can see this lattice work here, which is going down to the actual object, and it is getting in the way. It's too dense. What I need to do here is I need to bring down this structure. It depends how heavy it is, and again, like you would be considering the weight that's going down. But again, this looks overbuilt. What we see here is this inner wall is going to be the brim. This is going to be kind of like a little a platform on which it rests, and this is going to connect directly to things which are making contact with the actual surface plate. And then you have this outer wall here, which is going to be the skirt. And this is what I've read is to warm up the extruder, basically. It does a few test rounds, gets the material moving through it at the right temperature and consistency, and then it starts to go after your build. Also another way of tying it to the plate. So let's go through these settings. So I'm going to back up here a little bit so we can see a little more clearly, like this. And I'm going to go from these settings here with the object still selected, and I go to custom across here. So as I go to custom, I'm going to go under number 2. We see the shell, we see the wall thickness. The overall thickness right now is going to be 8 millimeters. This is the thickness of the overall wall. You have top, bottom wall thickness. This is the overall thickness of the combined top and bottom wall. So what the idea would be with the top layers and the bottom layers thickness, you can see that there's multiple settings for each of the sort of the top layers thickness and the bottom layers thickness, would be if you were doing something like when you make a building. If I was making a skyscraper, the bottom floors of that building need to be able to bear the weight of every floor on top of it, and they are built to be more structurally sound to carry that weight. So the floors at the bottom of a building are going to be stronger, they're going to be overbuilt. That's what we're looking at here to sort of simplify this concept. Right now, if we're looking at it, basically the walls are even. So it's the bottom walls have a value of 4 and the top walls have a value of 4. So that it would be basically the thickness going up from top to bottom would be even. You have one even thickness across this. What it says here is if you actually go through and you start to look at it, it's determined by this mathematical equation, what is the top and what's the bottom, but it isn't showing us any values. So it's doing it by some percentage, what it's calculating as the top section. I would imagine it divides it in two. The top is the top half of the model. It might do it by a percentage of the density of the model. So the thing that I know is if we start to go into the advanced features, I'm positive we can set this value manually where the top and the bottom would start if people want to do these sort of structural projects. This is something we will do in an advanced section on this. This is just a general overview of the main features. So I'm coming through here, top layers. Again, if any of these values for you as you're looking here are not showing, I come across here to this little wheel, and I don't think they were showing for me by default. And then I come in here, it opens up this window with settings and visibility. So again, shell, mouse across, and if we click, it's already open. If I close it, the wheel would come back up again. I click on the wheel and this opens. It shows me the shell, and because we're working on the shell, there's a lot of stuff we can add to the shell. We don't have time to go through everything here. The most relevant stuff is currently visible right now. This top and bottom wall stuff you might not even turn on. Like most people would probably want the wall to be one even consistency across. But again, it's an advanced feature, and we could really tweak this thing in if we went through some of the finer details here. Right here, it's saying this overall wall, you've got a count of 3 on it. So you're looking at 3 different layers. Let me see, horizontal expansion. What is this? This is, again, this is a feature I think that most people probably wouldn't even turn on. What this would do is if there's a hole in your polygons, and it's not supposed to be there in the build that you're making, if you turn the horizontal expansion up, the value of 1 comes up, it'll start to fill that hole. If you turn that value down, it's going to make that hole more pronounced. So if you want to see the hole, turn the volume down. If you want to see remove the hole, turn the volume up. Again, this is kind of like a weird one that I wouldn't even use my models. Your models should be perfect. In this class, we're supposed to be making like solid models. We shouldn't have this issue. We keep coming here. So this is the shell, and we can again play with it. We can see it update actually as we change these values here. We have to kind of get inside. Right now, what we can do is, which is visible and be easy to kind of see, is going to be the support material here. So let's go down here. The infill. So this is going to be what's taking place inside of it. Right now, it's set to triangles. We could set it to like a grid-like pattern. This should be the infill, which is taking place inside of the actual model. So if I wanted this model to withstand a blow, if like again, this is a physical object, which would be basically being used almost like a hammer. You would taking extreme impact, like basically being thrown into rocks over and over and over again. So to withstand that, you would want the structural kind of the pattern to work with this. So for mine, just as a prototype, 15 is going to be fine, but again, it could get pretty dense if we were to take this up. So we can go into this more like later on. Material. Okay, here we need to think about what's going on with the printer. The printing temperature should really be in sync with the material that we're working with. So you need to read about the material that you're working with and make this work. This is super important to get this right. Build plate temperature 60 is what I'm reading is supposed to be good. What you need to think about is how the material is cooling as the material is going from kind of this molten-like state to a solid. As it's cooling, things warp. As it cools too quickly, things will, when you warp, you can see it sort of buckle. It will start to kind of create a U-like shape. It will start to kind of fold upwards because one side is cooling more quickly than the other side. And when you see that U shape, usually what's happening is the top, the surface, is cooling, and at the bottom, which is on the build plate, is still too warm. And what's happening is, as the top is cooling, as you guys know, it's shrinking, and it's pulling in on the edge, and it creates like a taco-like effect. And you see this in lots of different materials, wood, other sides, and that's what's happening. One side is cooling too quickly, and the other side is not. So what you want to do is get this temperature right, so it keeps it at a nice, even temperature when it cools. Again, this would be related to the material that you're working with. But these default settings for PLA should be pretty good. This should have good results. You could even possibly turn this down a little bit. Printing speed 70. Might be a little quick. I think like 50 might be a little better. The slower it's going to go, you would want to sync this up again with the material and the speed that you here. So this again, come back to the machine that we're working with and the material that's printing. Z-hop when retracted. So basically what happens is as this is printing, if the print head moves over an area and it's traveling to another area where it needs to start printing again, it's saying that it's going to lower the build plate and safely lift the print head up and move it over so that it doesn't catch the object here. So that if it's moving from one area to another, it doesn't just drag straight across and accidentally hit something that it's already built. It's telling it to be conscious of things that it should be in the z-axis as it's moving that print head across to get to another location to start building again. So you would definitely want this turned on. This would be a yes. Enable print cooling. So basically, it goes back to what I said before about the speed at which it's drying. These guys have it worked out. They've been printing lots of stuff, and they know the speed at which these plastics materials needs to cool at, and they have a fan which is sunk to that kind of equation, essentially how fast does that material need to cool. So you definitely want the print fan on. Again, this could be related to the material, so I would kind of something to look into, but by default I would have that fan turned on. It needs to cool. If it doesn't start cooling, it remains in that sort of liquid-like material consistency, and it can slump. It would be like if you've ever worked with clay. That would be a great example. The clay, if you start to try to build too high, is going to fall over. If you're building a thin wall, it's almost impossible. So it needs to dry at the base as you keep working your way up. Again, read about the materials. Come over here. Support. Generate support absolutely. Extruder 1. Support placement everywhere. So it could be touching build plate. So that would be just kind of at points of contact. This will be much more conservative. Otherwise, it's basically coming straight down all the way across, and that's going to be kind of heavy. And I think that's what we were looking at the first time. We looked kind of overbuilt sort of everywhere. Angle support. So this is going to be the angle at which it's going to take like an overhang to count for build support. 60 should be the default. Support pattern is zigzag. So we can see at the bottom, this should be in a zigzag configuration. Let's actually slice this real quick while we're waiting here. So I'm slicing it. We can take a look at what we're going to see. I bring it over here. Bring it in. And what do we have here? Support pattern is zigzag, which doesn't look super zigzag. Line count, 0, support density. Okay, so here's where this is one of the more important ones. Some of these start to become like a little bit more meticulous. This one's a main one. On the support density, let's take a look here. It's set to 15 right now. What I can do is, it doesn't like me going that way. I'm going to turn the support density down to, let's make it 5. And then I'm going to slice it. And you can see that the grid is opened up significantly. I'm saving tons of material on the support, and my cleanup time has just been dramatically reduced. All I have to do is clean up these lines instead of the number, which was basically doubled. It was like double the amount of work, and it's going to look that much better. Does it need this much support? Don't know. I think like this would be about right for the light build that I'm going for. We could even, you could push these numbers up. Keep in mind that some of these values here are counteracting these values, so I can start to kind of push these back and forth, and it's going to start moving the grid around. This one's the one that you guys should be most concerned with. We'll do an advanced tutorial where, you can really start to have a major effect on the overall grid. With this, it can get extremely custom. The biggest one, though, here is going to have the most effect. So let's turn it up to 1, and you can see. Slice it again. You can see way out there, giant grid at this point. So probably this will not work. This is not going to be enough support for the object. So we could turn it back down to maybe like 7. Let's see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the brim here, and you already had the brim sort of built. And what you're going to do is you're going to see this inner wall is currently set to 8 right now. So let's slice and just take a look. So looks like it's more than 8 to me, but it's being multiplied on the other one. I could turn it down to 1 and watch the inner wall. So we can see that this wall here is shrunk dramatically. There's the other brim here. So this one is working against, like the two of them are against each other. So if I take this brim and go build pretty piece, so it's making 2 sort of separate brims. So it should bring this way down. Yeah. So now we're able to kind of bring that way up and down through these 2 values. So each ones are having sort of this different effect. This is going to be like a little light, so I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Let's make this about maybe like 7-ish. Like a slice. I could turn this down just a little bit. I'm going to keep going though in the interest of time. Next, we went through here, brim support, etc., etc. What else do we have? We've got here the enable blob. So basically what this is going to do is, this is again another custom one that you might not necessarily actually have to have, but what that's going to do is it's going to create a little blob of material to warm up the extruder, so it will actually start to print a little kind of chunk of mass. And the idea is to get the material moving through the print head at the right speed and temperature before it starts building this. If it's not going through, if it's going through too cold, it's going to basically, one of the terms would be like sort of spit. It won't lay a consistent line. It'll kind of lay a little piece, and then it'll move along, and then it gets enough built up, and then it spits out the next one, and it'll kind of be like little kind of dots as it goes along the line. The vice versa of that is if it's too hot, it's basically going to be laying like yogurt down. It'll have no a real kind of mass or consistency to it. It'll be just sort of like mush. And the idea is, as these lines of mush line up, they'll start to just sort of smush over and turn into just like a blob. The whole thing will sort of implode on itself if it was too hot. So we need to get the temper just at that right spot where it's gonna hit and land right. Okay, so we come over here, build print adhesion. So this is the idea of using the brim to tie this down to the actual build plate. So we want to anchor the object here. So we're kind of doing it here with this build plate adhesion. Dual extruder, build a tower. Again, custom one where I could turn this on, and it's going to basically heat up those dual extruders to get them ready to work with the build. I'm looking over here. Is there anything else here? Yeah, sure as possible. We could build a skirt, and I don't see the options currently open. So what I'll do is I'll come over here, build plate adhesion. Let's come into this option. Build plate. I'm gonna hit the little option here. It's a raft. Where's the skirt? It's gonna be up the model. There it is. Skirt. I'm gonna turn skirt on. Brim skirt. X. So this is under the build plate adhesion. Should be. Close build plate adhesion. There it is. Skirt brim length. I want one other one here. I don't see it right now. I had it before. Well, it is what it is. We'll get it. I'll come back to it in a little bit. But basically, yeah, the skirt is going to be the outside one. It's the value which goes around the outside. And we can also bring that up and down. Just not exactly right now. Alright, so we keep going. Support, I think we basically covered most of it, like the relevant stuff. You've got control over the thickness. Extruder. Let me do this. Just turn it to triangles, and I'll come over here and let's slice it. And there you go. It's turned this from the squares to the triangles. I can bring this like the brim size down so you can see it a little more clearly. I'll turn it down to like 2. But you can configure this by just basically working these values to your own liking. Now we can see it a little more clearly. And then I could go into the density. And I'd probably bring the density in a little bit on this. So the main density is 7. Let's make it like more like a 8, 9. I think we're getting close. That looks pretty good to me. You could bring maybe the brim up just a little bit on this, but I think this is starting to look about right. And you're gonna figure it out once it goes. So then just give it the visual once over and just make sure everything looks right. I think it looks pretty good to me. So at this point, if you feel like everything's okay, I can go save to file. So we've gone through, these are the basic settings. We'll do an advanced section on like the advanced settings in this, dealing with the overall structure and the internals, and we can do like even more advanced on the support. So to finish it off, I'm going to go save to file and just save it in the folder. This looks correct. And what I could do is we would save it to the USB card, which we would put into the Ultimaker, and then you'd be able to print. So let's go save. I don't have the USB card. And then basically this would be done. What I'd like to see for the homework would be file save. What I'd like to see for the homework would be you don't have to have the finished print, but I'd like to see this right here. I'd like to see the build, and I'd like to see like how you've got it set up. You can use OBS Screen Recorder to do this with, and just like I'm doing right now, just start screen recording, show us what you've got, show us where the two objects are coming together. Here's the original hanger, here's my little camera attachment, and then here's the support structure underneath it. And then this would be enough. You could do screenshots as well, but a video would probably be best if you could do just a short little vision of what you've been working on. So awesome. Okay, that's it.